I am so curious because, listen, as a player, when you're in these situations, when you're in a tournament, playoffs, you do have to stay somewhat neutral because whoever you play, you're playing for a reason. So there's no, oh, we get to play them now. They're not as good as we lucked up. We don't have to play if the number one team or if an undefeated team or the best team, if they get upset, you can't have the mentality like, oh, we caught a break. We don't have to play South Carolina now. We just got to play Iowa. You have to try your best to remain neutral and keep that kind of thinking out of your head. However, every player at least has in the back of their mind who they would rather play. Whether it be because of competitiveness, you might want to play that best team. If they beat you during the season or if you two are the top two, you may want that matchup. Or you may be thinking, I wouldn't mind playing the 5 seed or the 3 seed or who I wouldn't mind playing the other team just because it might seem a little bit easier. It may not be as daunting. Each player, I'm pretty sure, has an idea of who they would rather play, whether they say it or admit it or not. I am so curious about what LSU is really thinking about Iowa. I'm going to give my initial instant reaction in terms of the matchup. But I am so curious what LSU is thinking. Are they upset that they don't get to play South Carolina? Did they want South Carolina? Did they want that challenge? Do they feel relieved that it's Iowa and not South Carolina? Do they feel, I mean, again, it's the national championship, so it doesn't matter if it was Southwest Dakota State. If they're in the national championship, you have to take them seriously. I mean, that's the case for every team in the tournament but as you advance, the teams don't get worse, they get better. They're there for a reason. I completely rule out them just overlooking Iowa. That's not possible. From Kim Mulkey all the way down to the training staff, no one on LSU could possibly be underestimating or overlooking Iowa or thinking that we got a natty, we about to win it now, we don't have to play South Carolina. They would have been undefeated. That would have been the taller order. But no one is thinking we caught a break by playing Iowa. No one should really be thinking that. Not literally. Again, you can have a preference. You can say, I would rather play Iowa because they're not as physical as South Carolina. You can have a preference. You can say you would have rather played South Carolina because of the competitiveness. South Carolina beat LSU by 20 last month. So LSU may have wanted another crack at them. I'm sure they're honoring the matchup. But here's where I am with it. I actually think Iowa is a terrible matchup for LSU. As much as I think South Carolina kind of has LSU's number, I mean, I think that would have been a phenomenal national championship, an all-out war, probably back and forth. But I just feel like that game would have been a little more predictable, South Carolina, LSU, because I feel like South Carolina, LSU are so similar, and I feel like South Carolina just does what both of them do so well, just a little bit better. And I think that just would have played out naturally in that game, in that matchup. I don't think Iowa is the matchup that LSU should have wanted. I think you should favor familiarity when it comes to stuff like this. Iowa is unpredictable. I mean, you know what they do. You know who they are. They play a style of basketball that I think is dangerous for LSU. Listen, LSU was down by 2 at halftime to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech played zone majority of that game, and for most of that game, I saw LSU look a little lost in their zone offense. It wasn't until they overpowered them. They did what they do, and they did what South Carolina does. I thought the South Carolina-Iowa game, I thought that was going to go almost exactly to the T of LSU Virginia Tech. Because we saw the same thing. You're looking at the same thing. One team likes to space and shoot. The other team is built on size, toughness, inside play, physicality, rebounding. Both matchups were so similar to me. LSU was down by 2 at halftime. Virginia Tech went zone towards the end of the first half and went on a huge run. LSU couldn't score. They just looked lost in their zone offense, honestly. LSU eventually overpowered them. Offensive rebounds, Angel Reese, Alexis Morris was being dynamic and scoring from the perimeter throughout the game for LSU. Angel Reese really just started overpowering them in the second half on the boards, which is, again, how LSU does it. They don't beat you from three. They don't beat you from the outside. They beat you inside. Iowa LSU brings us right back to this contrast. It's essentially like, shooting versus rebounding, and physicality. There's other ways you can kind of dress it up, but I don't know if I'm going to go that deep yet. I don't think that Iowa can play LSU exactly the way they played South Carolina in terms of the Russell Westbrook defense, just sagging all the way in the paint on certain players. You can't do that to Alexis Morris. I don't think you can do that to Kateri Poole. She's knocked down a couple threes in these last couple games, and she will knock it down. Flaugier, I think the same. I think she's more comfortable with her mid-range shot, but I think Flaugier will take and knock down that three. I do think LSU has a little bit better advantage than a South Carolina because, just simply put, I think LSU is just a little bit better shooting the basketball. I think their guards are just a little bit better shooters than South Carolina. So I don't see Iowa sagging all the way back. I don't see them playing exactly the way they played South Carolina. But if you watched how Virginia Tech slowed down LSU, they played zone. They weren't sagging off player. They just played a nice little soft zone that focused on packing the paint and making LSU beat them from outside. So I could see Iowa employing a zone, especially after how Virginia Tech had LSU on the ropes, essentially just by playing zone. So why I'm a little worried about LSU is because Virginia Tech was getting threes off. I mean, again, the two Final Four games were so similar. And this is what I said in one of my group chats that I'm in when I'm watching basketball games. I said it in a few group chats like, these two games are dangerously similar. Virginia Tech was up by 2 at halftime. Iowa was up by 1 at halftime. And the two first halves were very similar. The shooting team had the advantage. But I said this, the main difference between the two games was Georgia Amore was the flame-throwing. She was the Caitlin Clark of that game, of that Virginia Tech LSU game. Georgia Amore was the Caitlin Clark. And I, just for the record, I personally only became familiar with Georgia Amore during the tournament, really over the last few games, and I mean she's lit. Virginia Tech was really impressive. I mean, for a lot of that game, I thought they might actually win it. I mean, they had a few girls hooping. The Purdue transfer, the big girl was hooping. But the biggest difference between the Virginia Tech game and the Iowa game was Caitlin Clark. Georgia Amore, I don't know her well enough. I don't know her game or her history well enough. I don't know really who or how she is as a player, only from what I've seen in the tournament. I know she can shoot the heck out of the ball. I heard a story about her during one of the games about how she I think they said she's from Australia and she grew up playing like rugby. Like she's built tough. And she can really shoot the ball. Like she has a cannon. She was probably the next best thing to Caitlin Clark as far as just her trigger and being able to get hot. And Georgia Amore did not start the game super hot or even super confident to me. I mean, she plays confident and strong naturally. It wasn't like she was scared or anything. It definitely wasn't that. I know that from watching her. She's not that type of player because she missed her first few threes. And, it's not like you have to make your first three just to prove you're in rhythm. But like Caitlin Clark, for instance, her first three was a bomb. It's why she's compared to Steph Curry in this sense, not just the deep threes, but it's because the kind of shots she takes, to anyone else, they're bad shots, but they're not bad shots for Caitlin Clark. Her head coach understands. You can't coach a player like that without understanding what a good shot is for her is different than anybody else. In fact, there is no good or bad shot when it comes to Caitlin Clark. There's no good or bad. Any shot that you might think is a bad shot that Caitlin Clark takes, look at her coach after she shoots it. Just go ahead and get a peek at, you won't see her coach over there putting her head down or waving her hands up or what are you doing or calling her over to say, let's get a better. No. When you coach a player that special, you understand that there's a level of sacrifice there as a coach. I feel like you have to sacrifice. It's not saying, just do whatever you want, but it's a trust factor. And when you're that special and when you have that much responsibility, there's no way you can have a coach micromanaging you and breathing down your neck and telling you what's a good shot and a bad shot. Only certain coaches can coach certain special players. Only certain kind of coaches can coach certain special kind of players. She lets her go. Caitlin Clark's first shot was a bomb. And it went off the backboard. It was like her first shot might have had you thinking, she just kind of got knocked off her rocker. That first shot might have had you thinking she was going to be in for a long night. But guess what? Her first bucket was a drive to the basket. She is deceptively fast with the basketball. I tweeted that. She's not athletic. She's not quick. But guess what? She's fast with the ball. And I tweeted this too early. It had to be very discouraging that Caitlin Clark was beating these girls off the dribble on first step straight line drives. Caitlin Clark had like 4 or 5 layups straight to the basket, pretty much uncontested. It's weird because Caitlin Clark is kind of like slow and fast at the same time. It's weird. Even when she's driving to the basket, it still feels like kind of slow. Some South Carolina fans were probably screaming at the TV like, why is she wide open getting these why is she driving to the basket uncontested? The deceptive speed where by her second or third dribble, you don't really know what she's going to do. And you're still wondering, like, is she going to the basket? She keeps it simple. She kind of has to. She doesn't have up and unders and she doesn't have air hang time where she can just leave her feet and see what happens. She's not Euro stepping you she keeps it simple. Even the one series against Cardoso when she got the switch and she just hit her with she pivoted and up faked her and just stepped through and shot. Like, that wasn't anything crazy. That was just simple pivoting and footwork and pump faking. Caitlin Clark actually just does a really good job reading the floor. And a lot of her drives were to her right. I know she can go left because she takes a lot of those threes off her left hand. I know she can go left. It's not a thing where I'm going to say they should have been sending her left more. But a lot of her drives were going strong right to her right hand. But she does a good job of understanding the balance of the floor. When you're at the top of the key like that, and you're thinking, when you're someone like Caitlin Clark, of course, you have to be ready to go by people because everyone's playing the shot. No one is giving you space. They're not sagging off her. They want to be in her space. So when you're being pressured, you're taught the first thing to think to do is blow by. She does a really good job. When you're at the top of the key and you see the whole floor, you see all 8 other players and where they are on the floor. When you start to think like, okay, I'm going to drive the ball, which way there's 2 ways to drive, right or left, but which way you go is based on where there's more space. When you're as high level as Caitlin Clark, you understand this. And she wasn't just going right to go right. She chose the side where there was less help, where there was more space. She does that really well. It's a very simple thing, and you'd have to really watch it to notice. She was beating them off the dribble, guys. I think Flaugier is going to be the assignment for Caitlin Clark. I think she's the best assignment. Her length, she has good defensive awareness as well. She's strong. She's confident, and I think she will accept and embrace that challenge. Caitlin Clark just picked apart the best defensive team and the best defenders in the country. So there's no longer a question of it, will Caitlin Clark be able to, will she be okay? Can she take that's gone. I fully expect Caitlin Clark to do what she does against LSU. I don't know if it'll be a 40 ball, 40-point triple double. I don't know if she's just in that mode. And I personally feel like Iowa is the hot team. I think they're the hotter team. I think they have the hotter player. I think they have the best player. I'm from the outside looking in. I'm a little concerned for LSU. Alexis Morris, while she's kind of more important offensively, defensively, she has the quickness for Caitlin Clark. She may not have the size, but at least she has the quickness. Kateri Poole has the strength to kind of body her. Give her some bump, give her some physicality. And Flaugier, who I think is overall the best assignment for Caitlin Clark, it's going to be a tall order. She's not JJ Redick. Most of her stuff is not like off the ball, running off of screen. Like if she does come off the screen and they pass it to her, a lot of times it's not like catch and shoot off of screens like JJ Redick. That's why she's more Steph Curry, because she does her damage off the dribble. And then, she has the nerve to be a great passer. Like, not a good passer, a great passer. Her angles, her touch on her, like, Caitlin Clark, she's a great passer. She pushes that ball. I mean, she, like, when you, like, watch her move with the basketball, she really, like, flies with the ball, low key. Did y'all see what she just did to South Carolina? It is difficult to deal with a player like this. Georgia Amore wasn't enough of just a natural monster to take down LSU. Not that anyone does it by themselves, of course. You need your team and all that. I had plenty of people saying Iowa's got to do it together. Caitlin can't do it by herself. They've got, yes, I know it takes a team. I know people have to contribute. But if Caitlin Clark scored 15 points in that game, they lose to South Carolina, guaranteed. I kept telling people South Carolina was going to win that game unless Caitlin Clark went into her own Steph Curry mode like she's been doing. That's the only way Iowa wins. It's not going to be a by committee thing. They're not going to go blow for blow with South Carolina. The only way Iowa was going to win was if Caitlin Clark did what she did. That was the way. And she didn't do it by herself. She had help. But guess what? She scored or assisted on every basket for Iowa in the fourth quarter. Every basket. It all flows through her. If she's confident, if she's hitting shots, if she's in rhythm, Iowa will be confident. Iowa will be hitting shots. Iowa will be in rhythm. I know Gabby Marshall has to hit shots. I know Sonano has to be tough and play well inside. I know Warnock has to be ready to hit shots. I know her teammates have to be ready. We all know that. No one player can win a game, can win by themselves. We know that. But guess what? You need your best player to be your best player. And with a player like that, where she does so much for Iowa, there's no way Iowa was going to win unless Caitlin Clark went off. So I kept telling people, listen, South Carolina, they'll probably be okay unless they don't stop Caitlin from going Caitlin. Because when a player like that creating that kind of momentum for herself and her team, that's why Iowa was in the Final Four. That's why they are where they are. It's not only because of Caitlin Clark, but it all stems from her. People in the program know it. All those girls, moms and dads know it. They know they're here because of Caitlin Clark. So I just think about Virginia Tech getting off a good amount of good look threes against LSU. They were just running better stuff offensively. They were just getting better shots, more creative shots. Virginia Tech was getting looks. That was Virginia Tech. Iowa, starting with Caitlin Clark, is very precise. They play good basketball. They're good passers. They don't force much. They know who they are. They believe in each other. Iowa is dangerous right now. Can LSU overpower them like they overpowered Virginia Tech? Like they tend to overpower teams? Well, South Carolina couldn't do it. Now, Aaliyah Boston's fouls in the first half kept her out. She was out most of the first half, and that takes away so much of South Carolina's inside dominance. But I even said in one of my group chats, I'm like, even when she was in, they couldn't get her the ball. Virginia Tech was sagging so much that they literally, they were just taking away the high-low. They were giving up an open three over the high-low look. They were giving up the three-pointer over the two-pointer. If you watch South Carolina play this season, there's at least 5 high-low dumps each game. That's what they do. They're so tall, they're so big, and their interior passing is excellent. You hardly saw any of that. I think I saw one, maybe two high lows in that whole game. I think it was one, and one of them was a give and go. And this is going to be the difference for me. I think LSU is a little bit more dynamic on the perimeter. I don't have the gall or the conviction or the lunacy, for that matter, to sit here and criticize Dawn Staley. We all, as basketball people, have our preferences and our styles and whatnot. Dawn Staley's style, there's no, how could you critique 36-0 national champ? I mean, you can't sit here and critique that. They went up against a generational type of player, and that was the type of individual force who could lead an effort to actually beat South Carolina. There was no other. Zia Cooke was right. There was no other team that could beat them. Iowa beat them, yes. And again, I'm not trying to just argue that one player beat them. Again, it's not how it works. But this is the closest thing it comes to that. Caitlin Clark scored or assisted on every single basket for Iowa in the fourth quarter. So if it was ever true that one player beat you, that's one example. She didn't do it by herself, but she orchestrated it. She directed it, right? She was mainly responsible. I felt so bad for Zia Cooke because, of course, she played so well. She literally kept South Carolina in the game offensively in the first half. She had 18 points. And I felt like, again, I'm not looking to criticize at all. But when I've watched South Carolina over the years, and there's always, the player you are in high school is almost never the player that you are in college. I mean, there's a learning curve. There's sacrifices. You don't get as many shots. I mean, there's always a learning curve and a transition. If Zia Cooke was at St. John's or Syracuse or Baylor or even LSU, I think we would have seen a different Zia Cooke over the last few years. And that is not, trust me, that is not a knock on Zia or on South Carolina or or Dawn Staley. But I think when it reminds me of Kentucky, those Kentucky teams with Calipari, Devin Booker and Karl Anthony Towns, and these guys who, have become stars in the league. But in college, they signed up for it. And that one particular team with Cal was when he had the 5-in, 5-out. When you sign up for playing for, a powerhouse team like that, especially when South Carolina and Dawn Staley have made it a priority to say we are built on our bigs. We're built on our paint play, on rebounding, on size and physicality. None of those things apply to Zia Cooke. Now, you need great guard play in college. That's always going to be true. But in the women's game, your bigs and your size is really prominent and has been really since the beginning, from Lisa Leslie to Candace Parker to Asia Wilson. I mean, bigs are always at the forefront. They've always been prominent in the women's game. Dawn Staley made that a point to make that's their identity. That's who they are. That's how we know them. If you watch Zia Cooke's high school highlights, you will better understand just how talented she is. I mean, she's special. She is special, guys. If Zia Cooke was at maybe any other program, she would be talked about in a similar way as Caitlin Clark. Not because, she's not the shooter that Caitlin is. She's not she's a different kind of player. But I'm telling you, Zia would have been like, the Kyrie Irving of college basketball, because that's kind of what she is already. And I don't think enough people acknowledge that. I don't think enough people realize that. And I'm not blaming Dawn or blaming South Carolina, but, when you sign up for a program like that, that's built on winning and, having multiple different high level talented players where, you're not going to be the focal point. You're not going to just be doing whatever you want. And we are making a point to say we're built on our inside play. Again, I'm not trying to say that Zia, should have gone somewhere else or would have flourished or would have been better off somewhere else? No, because her legacy is now she has an incredible legacy now. I mean, I think she chose really that kind of winning legacy over just going somewhere and playing let her cook basketball. Watching South Carolina these last few years, I would always just be like, man, I kind of just wish they would let Zia cook. It kind of surfaced in that game last night because in that first half, Aaliyah Boston's on the bench. South Carolina isn't laced with scorers. I mean, South Carolina shot 4 for 20 from 3. And I think Raven hit 3 of them, if I'm not mistaken. I think she ended up making 3 threes out of South Carolina's 4 total threes for the game. The only thing that watching them throughout the year, I mean, they were so dominant, and it's like, again, how can you critique undefeated? There's nothing to really say. But the one thing I was just always a little curious about was like, man, I don't see any dynamic perimeter play. I didn't know if it would ever cripple them or if it would ever become a thing. I think it has now. I saw the quotes from Dawn after the game. She says she's not changing. Clearly, she's not feeling pressure to change things. It's not like she's going to change her system and start, going 4 out, 1 in and start recruiting shooters and guards and downsizing, going small. She's not going to flip the script just because Caitlin Clark, just put them away. She's going to come back next year probably doing the same kind of things. Now, I will say this. Malaysia Fulwiley is coming to South Carolina. If you saw her in the McDonald's All-American game, she is special. She can shoot. She can do whatever she wants with the basketball. She is a highly creative finisher at the rim, can finish off right foot, left foot, all kinds of finishing ability at the rim. Malaysia Fulwiley. I did a little breakdown of her on the YouTube channel as well. She's special. She's going to be special. And now I feel like I assume Zia and Aaliyah are going to leave. Malaysia is the type where she could become the next ace in the hole at guard for South Carolina. I'm a guard, and so I prefer guard play. Like I said, everyone has their preferences and biases, and that just hasn't been a strength of South Carolina. And I would wonder that watching them over, throughout the season. I'm like, man, Zia Cooke is so good, so dynamic. When you don't have that consistent dynamic guard play, perimeter scoring, I do think that becomes a disadvantage, especially when you're going up against a player, a special guard like a Caitlin Clark. I mean, she's generational. There's not too many players who could do that to South Carolina and take them out. But that was just something I was wondering about Zia Cooke, and I'm just such a big fan of her game. She is like that. And I feel like too many people kind of lost sight of what Zia Cooke really can do offensively. Not blaming South Carolina or Dawn for that, but I think she signed up for that kind of atmosphere and environment, and for good reason, because she has a phenomenal legacy in college basketball on that subject of dynamic perimeter play. I do think that LSU has a little bit better, more dynamic perimeter play. Alexis Morris is kind of LSU's Zia Cooke, if you will. Kateri Poole, she can score. I wouldn't call her a scorer right now, but she can score. She can do things. She can pass too. She's a good playmaker. Flaugier, she does things on both ends. She's made some big defensive plays. I wouldn't necessarily call her a scorer. If Iowa plays LSU zone, which I think they will, and I think they're going to know how to play LSU in that zone. The biggest thing is it's going to be rebounding. It's not about out rebounding them, because what did Iowa just prove? I tweeted during the game. I'm like, listen, as it looked like South Carolina was going to start overpowering Iowa a little bit. I just said, it seemed obvious. You're not going to beat South Carolina unless you rebound. But Iowa completely disproved that. South Carolina won the rebounding game by 24, plus 24 on the boards, and they lost. Show me a game where a team loses the rebounding battle by 20 and still wins. The only way that happens is they probably had a special player on their team, because that kind of disparity on the boards, especially against a team like South Carolina that thrives off that wins off that, and you still beat them. Iowa doesn't have to out rebound LSU. They don't have to beat them on the boards. They just showed that they don't have to do that, and they can still win. Caitlin Clark has to be super special, but we can kind of expect that at this point. It's about securing, the right defensive rebounds, certain stops you have to finish. The only player they really have to honor as a shooter is Alexis Morris. They're going to know that. They're going to play that way. Angel Reese is a lot to deal with. I'm not going to compare between who's tougher to keep off the offensive glass between Angel Reese and Aaliyah Boston. They're both they're both extremely difficult. I do feel like Angel, and let me say this too. Angel Reese and Aaliyah Boston are friends, and there's nothing wrong with a friendly rivalry. They would still go at each other out of respect. But I just feel like it's better seeing Angel Reese go up against these Iowa girls who she ain't friends with at all. I don't want to point out the racial thing, but it is there. LSU, South Carolina would have been drama. It would have been war. That is a headliner. I just don't think we would get the same Angel Reese in terms of attitude and energy if she were going against Aaliyah Boston, her friend, who she respects so much, as we will seeing her go up against Iowa and Megan Sinano and Caitlin Clark. I think we're going to get the Angel Reese, the Bayou Barbie that we deserve in the national championship. All out, all energy, all attitude, all nastiness, because now she's not going against her friend. And again, there's got to be respect there, but it's different. Angel and Aaliyah are friends. I've seen them do an interview together. They love each other. They have that. It's that respect for each other. Still would have made for a great game. But I'm telling you, this thing, sadly, it has become a little racial, right? You got these white girls from Iowa. They can shoot, they're slow. They're not athletic. They're kind of annoying. They're a little tough, they just kind of get on your nerves. And then you got the NWO of women's basketball, as I call them, LSU, Angel Reese, licking the fingers, whipping the hair, celebrating, saying you're too small. That's the LSU. That's the Angel Reese we're going to get on Sunday against Iowa. Not that we wouldn't have seen it if they played South Carolina, but I don't think there would have been as many antics. I think most of it would have been rooted in respect and like, we're here to try to beat you out of respect. I think it's a completely different energy now, and I'm here for it. I am concerned for LSU. I really am. I don't think, and it's mainly because of watching Virginia Tech. The way Virginia Tech looked like the better team for a lot of that game against LSU. I just think Iowa is a better version of Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech went zone against LSU late in the first half and had them flustered, lost. I was like, yo, what are y'all running? I watched 3 or 4 straight possessions. I saw no zone offense. Iowa is not Virginia Tech. I know LSU knows that. I'm sure they acknowledge it. I'm sure they're ready. But I do wonder what their feelings are, what their temperament is. Do they feel like they caught a break by not having to play South Carolina? Are they overlooking Iowa? Are they excited for Iowa? Are they excited to get a crack at Caitlin Clark? I think this is a big game for Flau'jae because I really think Caitlin Clark should be her main assignment. Alexis Morris has things to do offensively, so you can't really run her ragged too much worrying about Caitlin on defense. Kateri Poole has the physical strength, I think, to bother Caitlin, but I think Caitlin's size and speed might be too much for Kateri Poole. I don't love that matchup for her. I think you can interchange and give Caitlin different looks. You almost have to. But when I look at the matchups, I worry for LSU, especially because of what I saw Virginia Tech, how Virginia Tech was able to have success against them. Like, Alexis Morris has to be special offensively. I'm not saying she won't or she can't. I mean, she's been showing that is what she's prepared to do. But you're going against Caitlin Clark, baby. You a first rounder, right? This is your time to show who you are and what you're made of. Alexis Morris was, the best guard in that game against Virginia Tech. Can Alexis Morris be the better guard against Caitlin Clark? It may not come all the way down to that, but Alexis Morris has to play so well. Flau'jae has a big responsibility. I think she is the best matchup for Caitlin Clark, and that's a tall order. It's not all on her, but individually, I think Flau'jae is easily the best matchup. It looks like Iowa is the hotter team. They clearly have the best player. They're smart. They know how to play. They stick to game plans. They're going to go in knowing Who can we who LSU's again? It's very similar to South Carolina. LSU doesn't have perimeter scorers and shooting. Iowa's going to be playing them pretty similar. I know they're going to play zone. I feel like LSU was a little bit more familiar with South Carolina. They're not as familiar with what Iowa does, who they are, how to stop a player like that. South Carolina couldn't do it. I am very interested to see if LSU feels like they can do it and if they actually can do it.